Rugby to Murrayfield, where the Calcutta Cup will be contested in week 1. We have Scotland v England. Always a classic, this one. It's been a humdinger for the last few years. England going in apparently as slight betting favourites, despite the fact that they've only won one Calcutta Cup in the last 4 years or so. And it's in Murrayfield, so dubious assertions, but they are apparently slight betting favourites. It's going to be Saturday as well, February 5th. Kick-off 4:45. We have Ben O'Keefe of New Zealand will be the man in the middle with the whistle, and Nick Berry and Craig Evans on the sidelines with Ben Whitehouse in the TMO for this one. So decent officials there, and the Kiwi ref keeping the tempo high, and with no we have Faz out obviously. Owen Farrell ruled out with an ankle injury. He was named captain before that happened, but that paves the way for Marcus Smith versus Finn Russell, which, with a Kiwi ref in the middle, that could just be box office stuff.
Oh, it certainly will. You were right to point out, one in the last 3, they had a 13-6 win. The last, or one in the last 4, no, you're right, one in the last 4. They had a 13-6 victory over the Scots in Murrayfield in 2020. Outside of that, the 38-all draw, which was amazing from Finn Russell,
yes.
That comeback, and then the 25-13 win, that iconic win in 2018 with the Hugh Jones break, and the win in 2021 for Scotland. 3 of the last 4 not won by England. There was the one draw which was retained by Scotland. So yeah, they're coming into this off the back, obviously, of some real momentum in this fixture, and actually just broadly speaking, I mean, they've had some really great performances last year. The wins over France and England away from home, albeit with the lack of crowds, was just massive for them. And I think certainly from a Scottish point of view, it's now a case of needing to deliver. It's a case of expectation. It's not a case of hope as much as it's a case of expectation. And not to be too kind of harsh on them, but as they've been a brilliant team for many, many years now, the Scots. They've had obviously this Gregor Townsend era, which we've kind of compared to the Eddie O'Sullivan era under Ireland, where they were coming and they just kept falling short in the Six Nations until eventually they got over the line
with a few triple crowns first before the Grand Slam.
Sure, but it was a different era. It was a different era. They the only real competitive teams that they had, the Wales were competitive in some years then, obviously 2005, 2008, even 2009. But England were off the boil after the 2007 World Cup, and in and around that era, Scotland were nowhere near where they are now, and Italy were nowhere near where they are now. So it wasn't even as big a challenge for Ireland, and they kept coming up short. They were just kind of had that personality, and but for the likes of O'Driscoll digging them out and Stephen Jones digging them out, they would have never potentially won a Grand Slam or had those big Six Nations wins. That's what I'm talking about for Scotland now, is that's kind of where they are. They've been delivering for so many years, but this year now, Finn Russell turns 30.
Yeah.
Stuart Hogg turns 30.
Yeah.
I believe maybe even Hamish Watson might already be 30. So those guys, you're talking about, realistically, this year, Six Nations, next year, Six Nations, next year World Cup. Yeah. And then that's it. If it is going to happen for Gregor Townsend, Scotland, and this team with all this quality that has been brilliantly building for so long, it's going to have to happen soon. And so the pressure for me is very much on for Scotland.
I think so too. They kind of need more expectation than just a Calcutta Cup, which, although yes, the oldest trophy in rugby and whatnot, it is
it's still a one fixture trophy.
That's it. It doesn't quite count the same. And when you're talking about preparing for a World Cup, and a World Cup in which they will be, by virtue of finishing third in their last pool, they're up against ourselves and South Africa in their pool in that World Cup as well. So it doesn't get easy for the task for the Scots in terms of the next 2-year plan. But part of it has to incorporate some silverware at some point. Yeah. It's got to be even a Triple Crown failing a Six Nations win, but easier said than done.
I don't even know how you manage that.
Easier said than done.
If you win a Triple Crown, you're going to be in the conversation for the Six Nations.
Yes,
you're going to be there, right there.
Yeah.
They go to Dublin the last weekend of the competition.
They lose to Italy and beat all those other home nations.
No, I don't know. That's not happening. They go to Dublin the last weekend, which is good because they have England and France at home in Murrayfield. Crowds are back. I feel like home field advantage is going to be big. Right across the board here. And they have the Ireland match. They can just put it to the back of their mind. It's going to be a big game for them no matter what. They've got Ireland in their pool. They owe Ireland one, but they can put it to one side and focus on the first jobs at hand, build a bit of momentum, and hopefully go into that game knowing a win would potentially win them the tournament, which would just be huge for
them. And then from England's point of view as well, we have as we were saying, not a great record in this particular Calcutta Cup fixture, but Eddie Jones has spoken about this being his first year of his third team with England, his third kind of block of I don't know, he gives around 3 years or so for a team to coalesce, and then he's certainly it's going to be a Vunipola-less England for the first time in quite a while. There's no Tuilagi in there. It's a completely new look. There's obviously Marcus Smith, who's a lot of hype around. There's this whole kind of Quinn's rambunctious style of play where he's like, well, we score 40 to your 33, and that's how we win the game. Absolutely grand.
Here, take your 21-point lead, opponent.
It doesn't
We
matter.
got fourth quarter Marcus Smith coming your way.
Yeah.
And that's like...
he did it to the Springboks, which was something that other England team that Eddie Jones was talking about, the previous one, was never able to do.
I can't remember an England team ever getting dominated like that up front and coming out with a win. Yeah. It was insane. It was insane that they did that.
They did it with 3 lovely back tries.
Yeah.
So they did against that really good defence. So that'll put them in prime position going in.
Yeah,
a similar task with the likes of Harris in terms of defensive robustness in the centre, which is what Scotland hadn't been about, like I was citing in the previous thing about like when it was Hugh Jones and the like, and it was all very razzle-dazzle but a bit leaky on the defensive end. Now they're a bit more kind of robust and solid in that midfield area in terms of shutting things down, so it'll take something exceptional and some good reading and some good running to unpick them. And maybe this is an England team that's kind of built to do that. They want to be pacey, they want to be dynamic, they want to still be powerful up front with like the likes like of Itoje and your Johnny Hills. These guys are massive men and they're not going to be slight in any contact, but they want to be explosive, not just in that area in terms of how dynamically they can attack different areas of the pitch and attack space.
Yeah, absolutely, no question. Although they are missing Johnny Hill, I think that was in it today. But we're going to just look first of all at the point of view of the game from each team, just how they're going to go about it, what their winning conditions are, how they're going to approach the game, and what we think they're going to bring this week. And we're going to start with the hosts, which is Scotland in Murrayfield, obviously, and obviously just to start from the beginning, I think it remains the most well-rounded professional team, perhaps. Certainly a professional Scottish team we've ever seen, but also potentially the most well-rounded team in this competition in terms of their lack of weaknesses. I mean, I look through the squad. There's just the one word that strikes that stands out to me when it comes to this Scotland team is actually balance. Yeah. They're just really well balanced. They've got lovely players with different complementing strengths, and that's a huge bonus for them. I think up front, obviously, there's potentially some concern, but like they've got McAnally, Turner, and Ashman now to pick from as hookers. Like they've always had someone injured. Actually, Fraser Brown I think didn't even make it into the squad. I think he's fit as well. Yeah. So actually, they've all of their brilliant hooker stocks ready. Ewan Ashman coming off that worldy of a finish. Back in the autumn series when he made his debut, he's very promising. We know what McAnally can bring when he's at his best. It's just a very exciting cavalcade of options. WP Nell is back in there, and he's a real weapon for them from a scrummaging point of view if things go wrong. And even at loose head with Sutherland and Schoeman, you've got two guys who are for very good players. And
Nell and Fagerson vying for the other jersey on the other side. Decent balance, as you say.
And the lock stocks and two smoking barrels out of this team is insane.
Last Six Nations, didn't they go through like 10 different locks getting caps or something?
And they're all quality, and that's what's great. Like one of Scott Cummins, Grant Gilchrist, Johnny Gray, or Sam Skinner is going to miss out on the 23. Which is going to give them a chance to rotate guys in. But if you go for a great Cummings combination with maybe a Gilchrist to come on, you've got serious heft in there. Like it's as big as any combination out there, and they are good on the ball as well. They don't tend to come up with mistakes. Sometimes Scott Cummings can when he's out of form. That's obviously going to be a point of focus for them. And then in the back row, I think there's a couple of doubts about Hamish Watson. Obviously he's top class. Jamie Ritchie's top class. They've got options at number 8. They can go with Fagerson, they can go with Bradbury, they can go with Haining, and also this out and out open side from Glasgow, Rory Darge, who's just a jackling machine out there.
He's uncapped as of yet, but he could be a bolter for this year's campaign as well, especially with the Mish kind of with doubts over his head, guys like that, flyers coming in. There's been a fair bit of that, guys just filtering in over the last few years. As you were saying, just like the pack has slowly been growing, and their scrum has gone from nearly incompetent at the top tier level to very, very combative when you had guys like Nell and guys like Sutherland putting their hand at Sutherland getting into the Lions on form based on his scrummaging prowess. And they've been very, very good for the last few years in that capacity.
Yep, they did have a tough day against the Springboks in that area.
Everyone has a tough day.
They've probably dipped a little bit in honesty from where they were at their peak, but if they can get that back, obviously it's going to be huge, and they definitely don't want to take a step backwards against England. As far as the backs are concerned, it's still Ali Price at scrum half. What form he's been in, really kicked on even from being called up in the Lions, just making smarter decisions than he ever used to. And he's got all those skills that we know about. He can generate a great tempo. He reads the game very well from an offensive point of view, getting you going forward. They have ditched the Scott Steele, George Horn backups who weren't really putting any pressure on him in favour of two uncapped players, Ben Vellicott, who's been starting at 9 for Edinburgh and doing a good job, and Ben White from London Irish. Hopefully one of those guys can put a bit more pressure on Ali Price.
Yeah, sure.
At 10, you've got Finn Russell, you've got Blair Kinghorn, you've got maybe Stuart Hogg. You don't have Adam Hastings. It's interesting. You don't even have the young lad Ross Thompson from Glasgow.
That's right.
So it's going to be Finn, and Finn and done. It's Finn for 80 minutes, I think, is the plan in every game.
Or Hogg can slot into 10 is the plan that they stick to, as well as
Kinghorn. Hogg has never worked at 10, so I think Kinghorn is probably going to take the 22 shirt, and they're not going to be wildly having Hogg as the second option.
Maybe that's true, or maybe they might want some of their more talented outside backs, or a 6-2 split if they want to get that, because they, as you're saying, they have many forward options as well. They definitely are putting a lot of their eggs in that Finn Russell basket, but why wouldn't they? He is kind of the fulcrum of their offensive kind of style and how they want to play. But you're right in citing Hastings, because he was the kind of understudy to him in that Glasgow team, and of all the other 10 options they have, he's the one that's most akin to how
it's tough on him.
He's playing out in Gloucester as well, which is a team that likes moving the pill similarly as well. So
I think it's tough on him, but sure, look. And in the midfield, Chris Harris, as we've talked about, wonderful defender, has revolutionised what this team does defensively, working in tandem with Steve Tandy. And then it's a question of who's going to back him up on the inside. They have got the option of Sione Tuipulotu of Rory Hutchinson from Northampton, who they do like and keep picking. But realistically, I think you're looking at a shootout between Sam Johnson, our incumbent, always reliable,
really like
quality player.
I think he was their best combination. Although
Cam
Redpath, who was awesome in that game against, wasn't it England?
Yeah, he just plays Calcutta Cup.
Yes, he has a winning record in this one game that he's played, which he
100% record for Scotland.
Absolutely brilliant in that game last year. If those remember, but then he was out for the rest of the tournament, and it was blinking you'll miss him.
And he's back in Bath, and all of a sudden they're winning.
Yeah,
what's that about? This guy,
he's really, really good.
I love him. I think he's a quality player. I think I wouldn't be surprised to see him take the 12 shirt.
Yeah.
But whatever they go with there, it's going to be juicy as far as both an offensive and defensive point of view. It just opens up the field having a guy like Redpath in as well, with the passing and kicking quality that he brings. And then in the back three, you got Hogg. He's taken that fullback jersey. Thank you very much. Doohan is back in the squad.
That's very
will
good
likely
news.
Feature. And they also have a cavalcade of other really, really good talents. Even guys like Rufus McLean.
Yeah, it's been really, really
just he's got this explosivity when he touches the ball. But for me, it could be Darcy Graham. It might also be Kyle Stain, who came into the side last year and just took loads of tries in November. So yeah, I think I just don't worry about them at winger. I think they've got really, really good options, and all of them will take a try and do their jobs really well. Yeah,
and that's been true for quite a while of Scotland, even going back to some of their previous kind of generations of this team as well, have had really good talent on the wings by and large, and they still do. So yeah, it's a very, very, as you say, very well balanced side. Yeah, and
it's Thanos's dream team, so it is. And this, what I mean by that is just that there are a few weaknesses when you look at their all round game. In those two props in the hooker position that they have a very strong, solid scrum. At its best, it's hard to get at it. You have to do really, really well to cause them distress in that area. Barring some concerns about Xander falling over, their scrum is really solid. Their line-out's really solid. It was near perfect in last year's Six Nations. They strike off it really well. They have a lovely offensive maul, which is a huge addition to their attacking ability. They take tries that way.
Strike plays off scrum are phenomenal, probably possibly the best in the tournament at that. A first phase strike moves off scrummaging. They're very, very good at that.
Their attack in general is very good, but you're right, to point out the strike plays. They're so killer. They were brilliant for them last year, getting Hogg to the edge with Russell and Hogg in a position to make the killer pass or killer play. Yeah. That's just always going to work out for them. In Harris, they've got this wonderful defensive 13 who shuts down the outside really well, and then they've got this brilliant assortment of turnover players on the defensive end up front as well. They generate turnovers. It's a turnover based defence, and it works really well for them. They get huge penalties, make big plays, huge momentum shifts when they're defending their own area. They rarely look out of sorts like they used to. So it's just it's hard to cite a weakness. The other area that's a massive strength that we didn't mention as well is the kicking game. Stuart Hogg's cannon spiral.
Yeah, and Finn's very deft, like bullet passing kicking. That's very, very flat and very quick to get from A to B. Doesn't float float for any period. It just goes directly where he wants it.
Just opens up the field so well. And it was Hogg in particular last year who was just a difference maker. I mean, if the England
it was a huge Achilles heel for that England team as well. Now, this is a completely new England team, but that England team towards the end were very kick for territory, very much like pin you back and then force you to exit, and then we'll strike.
We want to launch from like the 10.
Yeah,
between the 22 and the 10.
So just kick us out to there, and we'll have our line out. So not if you spiral it from one 5 metre to the other 5 metre, then that script just gets ripped up.
Very few teams can live with that. If you can just turn a kicking duel into your opposition pinned back, it's such a weapon. And Hogg brings that really, really well. He's playing with a lot of confidence at the moment in Exeter. And I think I see him, his kicking as probably the biggest advantage that his being on the pitch will give him.
As is often the case with this Scotland team, you were right to say there's very tough to sight a difference, because you do look, there's balance all over. It's very well rounded. They're good at pretty much all areas of the game. They're like exceptional at a few, but very, very good at all of the ones that they should be. The one weakness that I would cite is just the intangible quality of just the winning tradition versus the non-winning tradition. The history that you were reciting there, going like, yes, they had 2 historic wins away from home in both England and France last year, and yet they finished 4th somehow. Like they
lost at home twice.
They find a way to do that, and that is the weakness that you cite. And you're looking at the team, you don't know quite why.
It's sequence against little moments like the sequence against Wales after half time when they had just bullied that pack and had them going backwards and had them ricocheting, and then they go round the corner, meterage, we're under the sticks, over the line, ball dropped, chance gone,
momentum
momentum changes,
heads drop,
they lose focus in moments. They don't finish off plays sometimes like they should.
Certainly things like either side of half time, which is something that you cite about the All Blacks. We were singing their praises last year of like sometimes even when they're dominated by a pack for 30 minutes, they just dial into that, oh no, it's the last play before half time, now it's time to score a try. Scotland have the opposite of that sometimes. Like, oh, the last half, like it's time to throw 7 points away, isn't it? And it's like, no. And if you're a Scotland fan, I'm sure it's very frustrating that has been the case, but it is just looking on the player for player and on technique. There's no reason for it other than just, like the same reason that it's like winning teams tend to drag their ass over the line even when they're playing badly. Sometimes it's very tough to get over a tradition that's just long standing, and that has been the issue for Gregor just throughout his whole tenure, was just kind of getting over that finish line has been very, very hard. That's why we were very encouraged by things like the way they closed out that game in Paris to end the season last year. There are more examples now recently of them managing to get over it, and particularly in this Calcutta Cup matchup, they've managed to have some of their best days in their rugby history have come in this particular fixture. But it is still the caveat to attach to optimism.
No question.
When is it going to be like the full package from them?
Even that Paris game, they did blow it. They had chances to win that game. They were the better team in that game. Then they threw it away. Then France threw it back to them. Then they found the try, and that is what happened. Like, there is a narrative where France get the ball and decide, for the sake of novelty, to kick it off the field when they're in a winning position and the clock is red, and then it's another example of hard luck Scotland. But as it turned out, they got the ball back and did do really well from there to close out the game and find the winning score. That was impressive. They do need to bring that again. What they've done to England in recent years is make them really uncomfortable by not being able to win the forward battle in the tight five. That has been primarily what Scotland has done to England, is just when England are going into contact, they're not winning. Nothing's coming easy. The maul isn't working that well. Those forward carries that they love to do, where they're really well spaced and they move the ball with a bit of slickness, they don't work because Scotland are out of the line. They're tackling hard. England don't get the go forward they want. There's hands in there. They can't quite clear out the Scots as well as they might, and they just don't have the physical advantage that they like to have over teams, and that has made them uncomfortable.
The recipe that saw that it was the World Cup final kind of illustrated that with South Africa. It's like a team that England like to be bullies. When you don't allow that, and when you bully them right back, then they can come up with stuff.
They just get a little tilted. Like, even if you remember the Bok game back in November, which we'll cite as a positive for them because they won it, but in sort of the middle third of that game, and especially after the bomb squad came on and they were getting bullied, it was just penalty. Their forwards were red-faced. They hated what was going on, and they just kept coming up with bad mistakes and giving the Springboks a chance to kick their way back into the game. What on the flip side, what Scotland will have to be aware of is the fact that England found tries. And as good a defender as Chris Harris is...
This is a new England team. It's a more kind of Harlequinsian England team that are going to be a bit more kind of gunslinger. Like, let's go for it. Let's have a shootout then. It's Marcus v Finn. That's fine. We're very excited about our Marcus lad. Let's bring it on. So it is a different challenge for this Scotland in that regard. It's going to be a different Calcutta game dynamic to it.
And Harris, who's gotten loads of praise because he has been a brilliant defender, it's going to be a huge challenge.
Bigger test.
Like Lucanio Am got opened up by England. I don't think you can underestimate how impressive it was putting 3 past the Springbok defence.
No, it's huge.
That's the best defence in the world. If they can put 3 past the Springboks, they can certainly put 3 or 4 past you if you're not on your blow and playing really well. So it's going to have to be a real point of focus for Scotland, trying to get the read on Smith, trying to put him under pressure, and tracking the runners, the guys who are going to be picking lines off him and making big tackles and making big turnovers and big spots like this defence likes to do.
Like it may be a higher scoring game. That obviously there was that 38-all, but generally like
11-6 last year.
11-6s and stuff. I think it'll be a different dynamic to it. I think there will be more points on offer for both, weather permitting. Obviously, it is still Murrayfield. That could all change when the rain comes down. But just given the lineups and given the form of the way both of these teams will like to play, I think Scotland will have to arrive with their offensive tools sharp as well, because sometimes you've got to go after them.
They're new defensively. It's a new kind of system, and that always takes longer than the offense to work.
And if you're a guy like Finn Russell, who can be licking their lips at the idea of a disjointed defensive line coming at you, that's exactly what he likes.
Gregor scheming things up off set piece as well. He always comes with a bag of tricks, and that's going to be fun to see as well.
So it's got to be Scotland kind of being proactive with their home crowd, with Flower Scotland radiating around, with the bagpipes sounding, and another one of the great atmospheres that we have missed from the Six Nations that we will see again. Try and get that crowd involved early with some big contacts like that, with meeting those forwards, those still mighty English forwards, head on, driving them back, making the breakdown a scrap, making the line out a scrap, making everything as scrappy as they can, and then in those scrappy exchanges being the team that are just a little bit more offensively sharp than England are defensively sharp, and being alive to England's offensive threats that are very, very much pronounced, and are probably more pronounced with this iteration of England than the last few that they've faced. Be aware of all those things, but also just play your game. Be proactive and play your game, which they've done best against these opponents so far. That's why it's interesting. It's a new look England, but it's Scotland's best record in the Six Nations recently is against England. So
apart from Italy, but yes, of course. Looking at it then from the flip side, from the point of view of the new look England, it's an interesting spot for Eddie Jones's men. I mean, he's very, very perhaps shrewdly taking a bit of heat off his team going into this tournament, just talking about this being a new team and everything's about the World Cup. Like the cynic in you suggests that this is a little bit of media cover as well if things go wrong. Yeah. Like you can talk about like, oh well, listen, we're building for the World Cup. We've a new starting 10. Things are gonna come eventually, and all of a sudden the fifth place last year. No, it's not 2 fifth places in a row if it goes wrong. That was old England who had fifth. This is new England who came fifth place. There could be a little bit of that to it. But at the same time, it is a New England, and there's a fresh feel to this team, and a fresh case of personnel as well, which is largely a result of the squad changes, which are very real. I mean, there are some really big names missing. You mentioned Owen Farrell. He was named captain
before then.
Now Courtney Laws also named captain, also gone, axed. Tom Curry's the new captain. And there's a bunch of names missing. Manu Tuolangi is back for sale this week, but is not going to obviously feature for England as a result of that. But as with Wales, I think rather than focusing on what's not there, you do have to take a look at what is there. And as much as we're talking about this being a Quinsian backline playing, can be beaten up front kind of team, they have some really explosive operators up front. Ellis Genge, hugely impressive scrummager.
It's all buoyed from the fact that they made just going back to that team that made the World Cup, which is his last team. I think we were citing the fact that that does not happen. England do not have that campaign that goes all the way to the World Cup without Sarries playing the rugby that they were playing at that time, and just the way the offense was working, the personnel, and the way that they were doing it. Now you look at the dynamic of the Premiership, and it has changed. For those couple of years where Sarries were punished and sent down, you had Exeter emerge as a driving force in their background, and England as such became a bit more kick heavy, a bit more defensive, a bit less innovative on the offensive side. now, just with the landscape changing, Sarries have come back in, but they lost last week. They're finding it. Teams like Sale are defensively hungry. Teams like Leicester resurgent again this year. One of the stories of this year, Leicester Tigers, and George Ford is now back in. He had been axed, but he's now back into the squad in the absence of Faz, and with the undeniable form, as well as Quins, as well as Bristol under Pat Lam, and you still have Exeter. There's just a lot of really, really good sides playing different varied rugby for England to mine from.
Yeah, exactly, and it's offensive based, but then there's also a real physical bed to it. Ellis Gengen there with Joe Marler as two loose head options is class as far as hookers are concerned. You've still got Jamie George. That's so right. The talk of him being part of the Exodus was totally off base.
He's still playing class rugby.
World class, and himself and Cowan Dickey will form a powerful combination at hooker in terms of one coming on and one coming off. Then even at tight head, Joe Hayes for Leicester has been great. Will Stewart is still in there, incumbent, and then Kyle Sinclair obviously is your starter. That's as with Scotland. There's just a tiny concern at tight head there because Sinclair's form has dipped off a little bit, and he's been caught at a couple of scrums. But then in the locks, you've got the likes of Charlie Ewell's big unit. You've got Maro Toji, you've got Nick Ezekwe as well, who might come in. Obviously, they're a little slight in that area, and then they make up for it in the back row. And you've got Sam Simmons and potentially Alex Donbrand, one to come on, one to come off, or who knows, maybe them together. Tom Curry and his captain, and that's a few other options. Well, unfortunately, Barbieri, who was awesome for Wasps in their win against Toulouse and is a really class player, he's actually picked up a knock, so he's not going to be around. But they do have wonderful options in the back row, explosive ball carrying players, as well as a good bit of physicality in there as well.
And it's a new look to that back row with guys like Underhill actually undergoing surgery as well. He's unfortunate, though he actually had concussion issues as well, so he's undergoing return to play protocols too. It's so he's out, and then obviously the Vunipolos we were citing missing. So it is just a new look and a new kind of dynamic to that, how that's going to work, and Tom Curry being the constant to kind of keep it going. But just interesting to see how they operate. Yeah, and the other constant that's going to be in this team, as much as we like Rafi Quirk and we like Harry Randall, I suspect Ben Youngs with his 112 caps will be racking up 113 this weekend. He'll likely be partnering Marcus Smith with George Ford to come on off the bench, although it's an open question as to what to do in that 10 position, because if you have George Ford in there on the bench, you're probably going to want to use him. And then conversely, like, one is the veteran and one is a young player, and then your instinct is, throw the young guy in there and the veteran can come in and close out the game. Except that's potentially the opposite of what's true for Smith again and Ford, where Ford is a guy who's going to do your nuts and bolts in those. Do the plan for the first 50-60 minutes.
There's a case to be made for him starting the game, controlling what goes on. He picks good options. He runs a good offense. He probably lacks some of the playmaking and explosivity that Smith lacks, certainly as far as running the ball. But also, like, Smith makes some killer passes that Ford probably doesn't quite have in his repertoire. But he's in class form. He runs a very nice offense. He picks good options. He gets them going forward.
Leicester play a brand that is traditionally England rugby as well. Forward oriented with some razzle dazzle and some clinicality out wide. But
they move the ball well.
He'll kick them into good areas. He'll get his pack very much onside.
Occasionally has games where he runs cold and makes a lot of mistakes. Smith, I think, is the better player and the one I trust more. But there's an open question as to whether you really want to start with Smith, who tends to start games a little colder and finish them so well, that maybe the best combination is to certainly have Smith in there for the fourth quarter, because he's doing different things for Quins. I mean, it's a bit like watching some of those NFL quarterbacks when they got like the 2-minute drills, watching Quins this year, the way they come back into games, the way he just gets involved. Like, they'll return a kick and they'll be, whatever it is, 6 points down with play to go, and he'll just be involved. He'll be everywhere. He'll be getting on the ball, leading runners in the right direction, threatening the defence in any way that he can, and ultimately in every game that we've seen near enough this year, opening them up and finding the improbable win,
the breakthrough.
I don't know if I want to hold that guy off the field.
It happened against the world champs, which was so encouraging, because that is a serious bugbear for them, was the fact that they couldn't deal with what South Africa bring, which is just a bigger, meaner version of themselves in many ways, and it was just impossible for them to deal with for so long. But that seems changed with the addition of Marcus Smith and those guys who are a bit more gung-ho and a bit more kind of keen to find things in that last backs to the wall kind of scenario. And Scotland is another monkey to get off their backs. This is a good little way to kickstart their campaign. It's away from home, which means that if you can get a result, it's just such Brucey bonus points at the start of a campaign like this.
No question. In the midfield, unfortunately, one of the guys we didn't mention from an offensive point of view, who is going to become a fulcrum player of huge importance for them, is Joe Marchant. And he's like guaranteed going to be one of their biggest and most important players this year, but he did a couple of days ago test positive for COVID. Now what was interesting was when they cut down their team on Tuesday, he was still there, which is curious, but I doubt if he has COVID that he'll be able to feature this week.
Maybe if it's only Omicron he can play.
Who knows? But I don't know if that's quite the rule just yet. But they will have Henry Slade in there, I think, at 12, which is what they have been doing. Really lovely operator as well. I think he's very important to the team.
Yeah, his left-footed kicking as well helps out enormously.
I just loved his passing. It allowed them to vary the options so well, and we'll get into that as well when we're talking about their offense. And then obviously as like in the absence of Marchant, you're possibly looking at Mark Atkinson and pushing Slade out. Luke Northmore is another option as well, but I don't foresee that happening. Then in the back three, you've got Freddie Stewart, who has locked down that fullback jersey, class player. Yeah. And then a few interesting options on the wings. Johnny May's still in there, although his form isn't knocking the world out.
He's undergoing some surgery.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, he requires surgery on his knee.
Oh, right. Well, he's no longer in there. And then you've got the likes of Jack Noel, who hasn't played in a while. Max Malins, I think, has established himself. He'll probably be in there. And Ollie Hassel-Collins for London Irish, who has been very impressive, could be a potential bolter as well, as Tommy Freeman, who was in there in November. Yeah,
some decent talent out there. I definitely think you're right in saying, much like Ireland with Hugo Keenan, it was that fullback jersey that was being tossed around. There was Furbank at fullback for a wee while before Freddie Stewart kind of jumped in and was like, I might take this jersey for the next 10 years, thanks.
Yeah, indeed.
Which it seems that way. He was absolutely awesome. And again, that great try that he found in that Springbok game, that was so key to them as well and very physical from a young man. So, yeah, exciting young backline. Different balance to them without the likes of like Tuilagi sitting people down in that 12 shirt. That was a very key part of how their backline worked. And guys like Johnny May, who've been the ever there. It'll be just a new look to them, and it'll be fun to see them take on what is, we were right from Scotland's point of view, like the challenge of getting outside that 13 channel with Harris, who's a lion, who's a very, very competent defender, and Scotland will probably be the more cohesive just on balance in terms of how many more test minutes they have. So it's a fun test for this young backline.
Yeah, I loved some of the patterns that they worked against the Springboks last November. One of the ones that they did early doors that really completely caught the Boks on the hop was they had Smith running the pivot in behind the position, the back of the screen, the tracking run. They had Henry Slade at first receiver and the short option to his outside. Pretty standard setup. Yeah. And he can go flat or he can go back to Smith. So the Springbok defence is making the read off that. We're shutting down the inside. We're shutting down the outside. And Slade, from a difference making point of view, takes that ball and whips it way out to the wide channel, straight, direct. Freddie Stewart on the ball, caught you on the hop. And it was those kind of plays, and what England are so great at when they're at their best is just mixing it up perfectly. Yeah. Like, we just find the ways to open you up. Oh, Smith is coming out here, we got to watch him, he's quick, he's dangerous, he's their new man, we got to put a hit on him. All of a sudden, they just change the plot completely by having a guy throw a 40-metre pass to the 12, who you weren't expecting that from. You were expecting one of maybe 3 passes, and he comes up with this fourth option that gets to the outside of you. And then they do that constantly later in the game. They put up a similar shape, and all of a sudden they hit Joe Marchant running the short line, the basic run, because they're alive to the outside threat. And when England are at their best, they mix that stuff up so well.
They do. At their best, their passing game is top drawer, and that goes back to that Sarries team that were just running beautiful angles off the ball and creating this amazing pattern to watch go through multi-phase and just very, very difficult to deal with and defend.
And Jamie George is such a key part of that as well. I'd love to see him involved and just on the ball as often as possible.
As a pivot point, he's great. Like, the deftness of hands, he never has to. Like, it's always an example. Like, loads of teams do go to the hit up a forward runner. You have an option here, or pull back to the 10, and like it'll be effective or not depending on how much you simulate that you could carry and how much like the pass comes with a deftness of touch. And Jamie George is one, like Tyg Furlong for us, who just has good footballing qualities, where he's not going to like turn his shoulders out here before he releases the ball, telegraphing to me, you, everyone that is like the pass is not, no, I'm not carrying, I'm going to pass it back to my 10 that you can already shoot up and hit. Jamie George is one who'll take it right to the line and then flip it out the back or out the back here and do it deceptively and just allow
similar.
And then actually Don Brandt has a really good telepathy with Marcus Smith for that. Simmons is a great baller as well, depending on who they want. Like, there's a lot of good options for that kind of pattern based multi-phase, and just giving good options to a young 10 in Marcus Smith. to try and just pick from and then play what's in front of him, which is what he's so great at. If you have runners of that quality and passers of that quality, so it'll be about them setting that tempo, which you're right in saying it'll probably be Ben Youngs, although the other halfbacks that they have in there are no strangers to tempo either. So I think they will be looking to win contacts first and foremost, which is where a lot of these things stem, but then clear the ruck quickly, get it into Smith's hands, get it into these guys' hands, and try and work Scotland in the defensive end.
That's the important thing. You know, they're going to be running so many angles, trying to access so many areas. They're up against a defence that's very strong and that is turnover based. That will shoot for intercepts. They'll try to jackal.
So you've got to clear the ruck. Clear the ruck. I've never seen anyone do as good a job under duress as actually DuPont managed last year against Scotland and against England particularly. But it was under all kinds of duress, and actually even in the All Black game last November and the Argentina game where he was under scrappy pressure all the time, just skirting his head out and getting it clear. That'll be the mission for England's halfbacks as well, is just get it out of that breakdown, get it completely, and remove that tool from Scotland's defensive locker, which has been so effective for them in these Calcutta matches. If you can just make it about something else entirely, that's a key point in terms of just getting towards winning conditions
and
for
focus.
England.
Like, I think you're right to point out that England, like, if they're playing with the explosive confidence that we saw on the offensive end against the Springboks, they're okay with this being a shootout. They don't need to dominate up front. They need to focus on getting their nuts and bolts right at scrum. Like, Sinclair's going to lock it down. Yeah. Sutherland's not getting a piece of you, no thanks. The line-out needs to be solid, and they need to call that well, get their maul get that maul rumbling if they need to. But basically, they just want an even match-up up front. I
think one or two guys like Genge probably fancy having a cut at Xander, but that's just a personal kind of loose head attack kind of mode.
My whole thing is what they can't afford to do, even though they afforded to do it in Twickenham against the Box, is melt down the way they sometimes do when things don't go their way. Like, Scotland are a good pack. They've got to be used to that at this stage. They've got to be aware of the fact that England are going to be that Scotland are going to be on top of them in phases.
That and moments are going to go against you, and even periods are going to go against you, and not allow yourself to compound that by turning it into a high penalty.
Hold your discipline, trust your offense, get yourself in good positions, defend when you have to, and try and be the more composed team. And I think with the likes of Smith in there, that the fourth quarter could easily go their way if they are in that position, especially with the things you said about Scotland and their penchant for not closing out games.
Versus as we were talking about Marcus Smith, this unbelievable track record for grabbing the necessary 3 tries in 7 minutes to win a game.
Exactly. So I think that's the point, is just not to lose their discipline. Don't focus in the middle.
That's got to be the message. I know, like, Curry is an interesting choice as captain, because he is as level-headed as they come for back row forwards, but he is still like a dog in the back row. And
it's interesting they didn't go with Youngs, isn't it?
Yeah, you kind of want a bit of disconnect and a bit of dispassion from your cap. You obviously want passion, but you want him to be dispassionate when he's talking to the ref. You certainly don't want him to kind of like remove himself red-faced from a ruck and then scream an F word at the ref, which will result in a yellow card, So those kinds of tilted moments that you were right to cite, they were happening in that game, that they were on course to lose before they managed to dig it out of the fire very impressively against the Springboks. You could just see those bad habits that are not unique to this England team. They've been with England for pretty much their whole kind of tenure in the professional era. It is one of the bad habits. If they can be kind of knocked off their perch, or if a pack can kind of get after them, then they will tilt. There's a tilt in that English gene that can leave them unstuck. So if they can control themselves in that regard, and then obviously be in the fight in the last quarter, that's all they're looking for, and then they will be confident they can nick a result.
Stay in the game defensively. Russell will have good moments, but he'll also have bad moments, and you'll be able to pressure, and you'll be able to get some turnovers off the Scots, and then you'll be able to strike yourselves.
That's exactly
and play a good high scoring game. And listen, with all that said, how do you think this one's going?
45-43, but to who?
I don't know.
I would love for that to be the case. As I said, caveated by, like, it could be a rainy, misty, horrible Saturday in Murrayfield because it is Edinburgh. But no, just given the way these two teams are lined up, and given their kind of pedigree and what they want to do, I think we're more likely to see a higher scoring game than we have done in the last few years. I think more like what we saw in that amazing draw that you cited, where it was just all razzle-dazzle, all offense on a comeback.
I love the optimism.
I do hope that we see that. I think more realistically, I think the winning score might be about 30. and the losing score might be somewhere in the 20s. But I think,
I love this. That's optimistic. It is Six Nations time.
I know.
It could easily not be that.
It could easily not be that, but that's how I see it for this. It's just what I see from England, to be honest. It's a new look to England. I think Scotland are always game for a game like that if you allow yourselves to play that way. But just looking at what Quins are doing all season long, I'm getting more used to those kinds of shows. So, I'm going to give the edge to Scotland just in terms of the home advantage, as you saying, being a big one. And I know it's going against what the bookies reckon are the favourites. England might just nick that scalp to start their season, much like Scotland did last year, and flip that script and then have a bit of momentum of their own. But no, I'm going to say the Scotland edge a very, very good game here.
Yeah, I like Scotland too. I think maybe they have the better defence, and the sides are similarly matched up offensively, and that might be the difference maker. And as you say, home advantage. I think, with these tight games, it's going to be, it's definitely a point of difference. I think you could be looking at a Six Nations where really just one or two away wins is what decides the whole thing.
This is true.
Away wins and home defeats. Those will be the big pivot points. But I think Scotland, I think it is that lingering question of expectation. But they're coming in. They have retained the Calcutta Cup once and won it twice in the last 4 years. Even so, it feels like a must-win game. They've got to go they've got to go to Dublin. They've got France coming to town. They've got to go to Cardiff. You got to open your home. You can't open the tournament with a home defeat here.
It would be Triple Crown gone. It would be all pretty much realistic hopes of winning the tournament gone in week one, and then it's another year goes by, and they can play some scintillating rugby and score some sexy tries from here on out. But they got to show up here in week one, get this win. They are good enough to do it, and I do back them to do it. I think you're right. I think they are slightly the better team. You're seeing a different game to what I'm seeing though.
No, it's similar enough. I mean, you always imagine the offense is probably winning a little more than they usually do. There'll be fallow periods in the game regardless of what happens. So I think possibly a little lower scoring, but still nonetheless
23-16.
Yeah, nonetheless with some good tries in there. Yeah, maybe 26-20 or something like that. But I'll give the edge to Scotland.
Okay, what do you reckon? I'm sure there are many people who are stewing, many English fans going, what? What?
Well, we'll see.
We'll see.
They can still easily win the tournament.
They could. Yeah. I'm not writing anyone off, but it's symptomatic of just how close these top five sides in the Six Nations really are, and how it's going to be fine margins either way, and I'm just expecting scintillating rugby. It's a great show for the opening weekend and the opening Saturday to have, obviously starting in Dublin, but then moving over to Murrayfield to see the Calcutta Cup. It is what it's all about. I'm very excited for this one.
Oh, totally. It's going to be a super, super Saturday in Six Nations. Not quite the super Saturday, but one of. Two big games to kick off the tournament and kick off the international season.
Thank you for tuning in to the Overlap Rugby podcast. If you enjoyed what you hear, please like and subscribe, and leave a comment down below as well. We enjoy hearing your opinions too. Thank you.